So I didn't buy the fanciest product, but I just bought what I would consider to be more entry-level product, that if times got tough for people, they would look at the type of unit I had and say, that's great value. Interestingly, the payment structure, as you described, was, a lot more flexible. And then we got into a period of time where it was as a minimum 20% down.
Because the builder is building on future value, they have a certain number which they expect to hit. There's been a regression in the last couple of years for condo prices. So the value which should have continued to go up, which is what the builder was basing that price on, it's coming in less than what the buyer bought. The bank is not going to lend you on what you purchase on. They're going to lend it on what the current value is.
There was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of hype around the pre-construction industry, and people went crazy.
Before you get into any investment, you have to run your numbers.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the DC Talks podcast with David Chinelli. I'm your host, David Chinelli. I don't have Owen. He's in the background today. But we do have a really special guest with us today. I've got one of my managers from Royal LePage Signature, Michael Stothers. Welcome.
David, thanks for having me here. You've set the bar very high, special guest. So hopefully we'll be able to deliver some value for the audience here today.
Well, you're special to me, Michael. How about that?
If nothing else, that makes me feel a whole lot more comfortable with the podcast here. So thank you for having me.
Well, honestly, guys, it's taken me a while to get Michael here. I've asked you, you went to Florida, did some other things. We've been trying to get Michael on because I want to always bring in some of the staff from Royal LePage, but also show a little bit of the dynamic, like where you started. And so we're going to talk more about real estate investing, I think, today. Sure. That's the idea, the kind of spin, because we wanted to show you the quality of the managers that we have at the office. And Michael himself is, you've been invaluable to me. You've been a manager at Royal LePage Signature for 5 years now?
Yeah, just coming on to 5 years.
Yeah. He was just joking around that you started COVID. So you came just before COVID. It was your fault. So we'll blame you. You've been in real estate for how many years and how did it start?
Well, I've been in real estate for about 22 years. So I guess I may as well get this out of the way here. But my beginning actually started as a public school teacher. So that's what I was originally trained for. I went to teachers college. I did the whole deal. And I ended up in the public school education system with Peel. So that's where I started. Did about 7 years in the system. I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive wife, and she knew I wasn't enjoying what I was doing. I was always having, different side businesses. I was going through the teaching thing, and I decided that, at the age of 30, with 3 kids and a mortgage, that I would get out of the teaching system and into commission-based sales. So that's what ultimately, sort of was the beginning for me. I didn't start off in real estate. I was in another commission-based sales opportunity for a couple of years, ultimately ended up in the brokerage business. So I met what became my business partner. I traded in real estate at the very beginning. But when I got into the brokerage business, I entered in as a partner to what became my business partner. So I was a business owner with my partner, who was 15 years older than me. I was his exit plan. So that's how this originally started. And we had this crazy idea that we were going to build a large brokerage that spanned across Southern Ontario. So ultimately, we expanded between Niagara and Ottawa. We had 10 offices. Oakville was head office, so that's where I directly managed. But we had offices in Niagara, in Mississauga, Oakville. Where do we have? We're up in Milton, but we had 3 in Ottawa. Kingston, we had 2 out in Kingston as well. So we had these offices. And then ultimately, Royal LePage Canada came along and said, we would like to acquire you. So that's how I ultimately ended up in the Royal LePage system. They bought out my company. I was the broker of record at that point. I was managing one of the offices. I was overseeing the other facilities. And Royal LePage in 2013 bought me out, flipped all my offices to Royal LePage offices, and I became a manager in the Royal LePage system as a result of that. So that's how I ended up in Royal LePage. And then ultimately I ended up at Signature. And for me, Signature has been a great opportunity. I really feel privileged to work for the Slightum family. And it really fits with my sort of entrepreneurial background and the organization that I'm now currently with. So very happy with Signature. And quite frankly, and again, I am a paid manager, but you may agree with this as well. like we have really elevated the brokerage business in, quite frankly, Canada. So very, very proud to be part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. Like I talk to Chris Slightum all the time, and we get recruited a lot as signature agents, and especially busy agents. We get recruited a lot, and we always sit down at the table, and I talk to Chris about it too. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, what do you have to offer? And there's like, they don't have what we have. And it's like, all they can do is like, well, I can give you a little more commission. I'm like, yeah, but what do you get for it? It's the same thing coming in. Like, and then the money's like such a small amount, right? What we're talking like pennies on the dollar. We're like, that's not going to motivate me. And like, and that's, they do such a great job. But so were you ever, I just, you became the broker. Did you sell a lot of real estate before? Or?
So I sold at the very beginning, but I was always on a plan to be on the management track, to own it, to take over as the broker of record. So yes, the beginning included real estate sales, but it was always with an eye to, building out a bigger brokerage than what we had started with. So when I started with my partner, we were 3 offices. We were Bronte, so South Oakville, the main office, which is Dorval, and then Milton. And then we kind of figured that that's not big enough for the 2 of us. So we went out on this crazy plan of acquiring brokerages, of building businesses. And, we had some success. But, the other thing is we learned a lot of very difficult lessons along the way. And I can tell you, I've made pretty much every mistake that you want to make in brokerage ownership, but thankfully was able to survive it and be here with you today.
That's awesome. Well, I asked you because it's like, I always find the managers that have sold before make the best managers. They give the best advice. And I always find with you, like you always are, if you don't know the answer, we find, which is hard, it's hard, but you always have, I've done this before, or I've seen this before. And it's like, and I guess having that many brokers or having that many salespeople also helps because they have questions in which at this day, they're pretty much not a lot you haven't seen before. Yeah,
very true. And I'm also a big fan of putting deals together, right? So, listen, we work in this infrastructure of compliance and regulation, and these are all great things. But at the end of the day, we want to help buyers and sellers, achieve whatever they're looking to do in real estate. And so, I feel that there's often, many ways to get to the solution. So, part of my role with the salesperson is to just go through what are the opportunities or what are the possibilities and, figure out what ultimately is the best path to get the outcome that we're ultimately looking for here.
So you love investing in real estate.
Well, it started later in life. I will tell you that. The brokerage business really slowed down the plan of owning real estate. It is one of those things that I wish I'd started much earlier. I've been in the real estate investment game now since about 2018. 2018, I probably started. So really just, about 5 or 6 years here. Part of the thing that I was, talking about in sales meetings was what a great time it was to buy real estate. And I was promoting this with the salespeople that I was interacting with. And I was like, why are you not doing it? Why will you not just get off the sideline, figure out a way to make this work? And ultimately, I got in 2019. I went on a bit of a buying spree, and because I really felt that there was an opportunity at that time. If you take a look at the graphs, we share those with Signature. And there was a period of time where the market had pulled back from the pricing that we saw in 2017, and it made for a real buying opportunity. So if I believe that to be true, I jumped in with both feet and, made some acquisitions and really have benefited as a result of getting in at the time that I did. So, we've had the privilege as a family to be involved in resale investment. We've done pre-con, I've done assignment sales. I have my kids in real estate at this point. It's really been a tool for us to build, generational wealth. So that's, for us that has been a real success.
So when you're first got into real estate, what was your first purchase? Was it a resale?
Was it was a resale. Yeah, it was a resale. It was on the MLS. A buddy of mine, funny enough, was the listing agent. So I will sometimes give him a bit of a hard time about the fact that, he was a little tough on me, but it was a resale property. I also buy things that I feel good about. Like there's a lot of different investment strategies that you can undertake, and you just have to figure out ultimately what is right for you. So there isn't a one fits all type of situation. I made a decision that I want to have a certain sort of oversight of the property. So I am going to provide the property management. So I wanted to have it close by where I lived. I kept them sort of grouped in the same area. I guess you could argue that you're not spreading out your risk across multiple markets. But for me, that was really something that made sense. And I bought product that I felt was good value. So I didn't buy the fanciest product, but I just bought what I would consider to be more entry-level product, that if times got tough for people, they would look at the type of unit I had and say, that's great value. So my first one was a 2-bed, 2-bath, 2 parking. And
Condo?
it was a stack town.
Stack town.
So it had a condo component to it. Bought it at a time when it was really undervalued. And we did that a few more times. We did some pre-con. I think every type of investment vehicle that's available has a place. So to say, is pre-con a potential for some people? And the answer is yes.
Of course.
I had a son that we got him into pre-con, and he didn't have all of the down payment right out of the gate. So we facilitated the down payment with the builder. He ultimately paid us back over the 4 years that the builder took to deliver the product. And at that point, he actually got himself full employment that would allow for the ongoing, payment for the product. But, change of plans, he ended up in Europe. So Dad's now managing that for him as well. And we have that one rented out.
So for the audience, pre-con is obviously, not obviously for those, it's pre-construction. So what it is, you go in and some of these projects, depending on the type of building, I had one where I purchased, took 7 years to build.
Yep.
It took a long time. The reason why, and Michael alluded to this, is that in a pre-construction, what happens is that you look at a plan, you might have a model, and you kind of figure if you like the area, you look at some plans and floor plans, and so I would say for a condo situation, it would be, you pick a floor plan you want. Sometimes you have to compete against other people. But once you get it, what you usually have to do is put $5,000 down, roughly around there, and you get access to that. So they'll hold it for you, and you have 10 days, which is called the cooling down period. During this cooling down period, you bring this offer to your lawyer, you review all the documents, you look at whether there's any pitfalls, any kind of levies, which would be expenses after the day, which you can cap so there'd be no more spent. And basically all the rules and regulations. It's a big document. Within that 10 days, if you decide not to purchase the property, go forth with this property, what happens is that you get that $5,000 back. Nothing happens.
Correct.
But if you decide to move forward with it, then usually the first 5% minus that $5,000 is due. And every builder has a different payment plan. Now, when I was first purchasing pre-construction, when I first started 9 years ago, the payment plans were great. Like some of them extended for you didn't have to pay all 20%. So it's usually 20% down. Don't have to pay all 20%, the last 5% until closing. Now some builders have actually shortened that, right? So what Michael was alluding to is that his son could pay that 20%, and it could have been like 3-4 years. Some builders like Tridel will make you pay that 20% within 365 days.
Yeah.
So you have to know the builder, what they're looking for. The other thing is what used to be really great about it is that you didn't have to have an approval from a mortgage. So we would go to a bank, go to a broker and say, well, this property's not going to be built for 4 years. Can I get a pre-approval? They would write you something and say, sure, you're pre-approved, but it really wasn't worth anything. And the builder would take that to the bank and say, look, these guys are pre-approved. In reality, we weren't really pre-approved and nothing gets pre-approved until the building's actually set. Sure. Things have changed a little bit. Now they scrutinize a little bit more. Well,
I would say they scrutinize a fair bit more. And you're absolutely right about the payment structure. Interestingly, the payment structure, as you described, was, a lot more flexible. And then we got into a period of time where it was as a minimum 20% down. And it would be, maybe up to, 18 months, maybe 24 months. What you're actually seeing again today is that there is a more relaxed payment structure.
That's right.
With the challenges that the pre-con are currently experiencing, the builder is looking at different ways of getting people into the market. And one of those ways is, again, a more relaxed payment structure where, previously they were looking for 20% and as quickly as they could get their hands on it. But today you're probably going to be 15% over, probably 24 months, maybe even longer. And then maybe the last 5% at occupancy.
Yeah.
But basically you will have to plan for, having that 20% ultimately at the time of the registration, which is going to fit in the case of most lenders as well.
Yeah. So the other reason why, and Michael talked about the reason why the payment structure has been changing, is also the price of condos and who the purchasers were. Now, I think it was Jeff that said something, over 80% were of 80 to 90% of purchases of pre-cons used to be investors. right? So this is not their primary home. They're not looking to move into it. And the longer it takes them to build, the better it is. But back when I was purchasing, this was perfect because, again, I wasn't looking to move into them. One of my projects just got closed this year. It took 7 years to build. Again, me and my partner, we bought into it. We didn't care. But the other things we loved about it at the time is that the pre-construction prices were less, or at the point we bought that one was less than the resale value. So a condo that resale was already built was more expensive than the pre-construction.
Right.
Now, the reason why things have changed is that first investors may or may not be looking right now as an option because the price in the GTA we've talked before is skyrocketed. And I think they talked about it before. It's gone up depending on the area. I know, depending on the area.
And again, the builders factor in what would be future pricing.
That's right.
And
they never used to do that.
There was a period of time where the builder sold the product at a certain price. We talk about in the industry, we talk about cost per square foot, right? So they sold it at a cost per square foot. It came time for the buyer to take possession of it, and the value had gone up significantly. And the builder was like, this seems a little unbalanced here.
Yeah.
Well, they're now pricing it more on a future value basis. One of the challenges that we have here right in the GTA, as you're aware of, is the fact that the costs associated with construction have become so prohibitive for pre-con. And so the reality is that, between the land and the labor and the materials and the development charges, it's really forced the builder to have a certain price point that they need to be able to hit in order to make it profitable for them. So, some of the benefits, some of the experiences that we had, let's call it going back a few years, is not necessarily going to be the same going forward. And, you talked about the lending, and I've, sort of heard stories about the lending previously, but today the builders are a lot more diligent to get an approval from one of the big five, and that will then be the basis for them giving you the ultimate unit there.
Yeah. So one of the challenges we're also seeing is most of these approvals that because the builder is building on future value, they have a certain number which they expect to hit. Now, what we've seen in the condo market recently is that there's been a regression the last couple of years for condo prices. So the value, which should have been continuing to go up, which is what the builder was basing that price on. Well, if an appraiser comes in, which is from the lenders getting an appraiser coming in, it's coming in less than what the buyer bought. And they're going to have to, so for example, if a builder thought, you'd have 5% growth in the next few years, well, you're going to buy a condo for $500,000. Well, the condo market's continued to increase. All of a sudden, the last 2 years, what should have been about $500,000, maybe in today's market, it's now down to $450,000.
Yeah.
So the bank is not going to lend you on what you purchase on. They're going to lend it on what the current value is. So if an appraiser comes in and says, hey, in order to get this mortgage, you have to fork up more money. What do you mean? Well, the value based on what the resale is $450,000,
yes,
not $500,000. So if you want to close on this property, you got to bridge that gap at that $50,000. And some people can't do that in this market, especially if they're investors. And that's why we're seeing what we're called assignment sales, which is selling the paper.
Yeah, it is one of the things that we're seeing the outcome of today, right? There was a period of time, I'm going to say roll back the clock 5 years. 5 years ago, people were competing for pre-construction purchases, and you were challenged to be able to get a good unit in the building that you were looking for here. So there was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of hype around the pre-construction industry, and people went crazy and they paid, increasingly high prices for these pre-construction units, believing that the market was only going to continue to go up.
And also believing that the interest rates were also going to stay as low as they were. Sorry.
Right. And the reality is some people actually didn't have a plan of even closing the transaction with the builder. Right. So they got their approval. How they got it, we don't, need to dig into that, but they got their approval.
You guys can do your own research.
They got their unit, and they believed that the value was going to go up, and they were going to unload the unit at some later time, make some money, because they've been doing that over the last number of years. And then unfortunately, or the reality is that things changed. Interest rates went up, the pricing came down, the value, as you said, wasn't being given by the bank for the approval. And they were now in this situation where they couldn't close on a unit. And so we've seen a big surge in the assignment sale market. So, there's some great opportunities. If you are a buyer today, I think there's great opportunities out there. Whether you're going to look in the resale market in the condo, particularly down in the core, or if you're looking in the assignment market, there are great possibilities for you in those two segments. So something to think about.
Yeah, it was funny. We ran the numbers yesterday.
Okay.
I don't know if you saw my market update or not. So you guys are watching this a little close to the end of the month. So every month, I run the numbers. I like to use my economics background and use a little bit. And no offense, I don't use all the script that you guys give us to do. But I noticed the one thing was, every month I try to figure out something different that's in the market. And one thing I noticed was when Treb came out with their numbers, they have the nice little box at the bottom. It's like, sure, our numbers had gone down compared to the previous years about sales. But the one thing I noticed in Toronto was that everything stayed relatively flat. Like all of the sale, like the average sale price on all units, and the detached segment went up 0.5%. And all the rest of the segment were like under 1% change. Whereas the 905 was anywhere from 2.3 to like 3.4% decreases.
Right.
So according to the GTA, it's like averaging out. The reason for that, I find, is that we've always said it all depends on the areas you purchase.
Correct.
Toronto never goes crazy high, but they never go crazy low. I always find it's very steady growth within them. But people looking, I would also say one of the pitfalls, I think, when people are looking to purchase, when people start jumping on bandwagons and you see areas which are very volatile, you have to be aware of that. One of them I find is Brampton.
Sure.
Ajax is another one too. I find they're very volatile. When the market's hot, they go crazy hot. People start buying. But when the market drops, inventories drop. Any words of like, what would you tell to home buyers? Like, would you stay close to that, or would you try to buy it?
Again, I think you really have to take a look at what you are prepared to invest in. And I think that really comes down to a sort of a personal choice. I chose to invest primarily in condo. I didn't want exterior maintenance. So as a result of that, I went into the condo segment. I also chose to have it, at a level of product that I would feel good about the tenant pool that I would be calling on. So again, that was a personal choice. But if you felt that you were prepared to manage exterior, and if you felt that you wanted to do a multiplex, I think really a multiplex is really, if you want to take a look at the numbers, like the challenge that we have in the GTA is the fact that everything got expensive. Yes, rents have gone up a lot in value, but the cost of everything is very high. And it doesn't, in the investment world, it doesn't cash flow. With the investment of, or with the amount of invested money to purchase the unit, the income that you're going to generate doesn't cover the expenses. So we're talking about negative cash flow as a result of that. And the reality is, GTA for a single unit or a single property, whether like a town or a semi or whatever, is unlikely going to cash flow.
Right.
So you either have to accept the fact that it's going to be negative, and there's got to be other factors that are going to offset that. Maybe you believe the interest rate is going to come down, which I believe it is. Maybe the price is going to go up, which I believe it is. And that's going to offset the fact that you're going to have a negative balance. But in other cases, people say, no, I don't want a negative balance. So you have to figure out a way to get the income up.
Yeah.
And there's a big push right now across the GTA for the legalization of lower units. So I think that's really, whether the unit has, income on the lower level, or if you can create that, opportunity for yourself. I think when you take a look at an investment opportunity that includes upper and lower, the numbers start to become really interesting. Yeah. So you say, like, what should I do? Not one right answer.
No.
When you take on a multi-level, you are going to be managing the headache of two tenants that hopefully get along, but may not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, I've had this discussion before with some of my clients, and like they've had a bungalow. And they're like, what do we do? Do we rent it out as is, or do you rent it as 2 apartments? And I said, depending on what you're looking for, right? If you want to manage one, you will get less money with one tenant.
Correct.
But you will get less wear and tear. You may get less headaches. It all depends. If you were able to put renovate it to a point that, there's less headaches. So your plumbing works good and that your heating, all that stuff too. But you might have fights between the two of them, because if there's only one central air or one central heating, they may not get along with that. And then you have to deal with people fighting. It just happens. But you can definitely rent out 2 units more than even in the same dwelling, whether it's a bungalow. If you have an upstairs apartment and a downstairs apartment, you will earn more money. That's just how it goes.
I like legal as well.
Of course.
Right? Yeah. I like legal. There's a lot of, opportunities out there where there's a illegal or non-registered.
Is it 90 or 95% of the basement apartments in Toronto are illegal?
I don't know the answer in terms of the percentage, but it would obviously be high. But I will tell you that increasingly the local governments are pushing for, increased density, increased legal lower units. So they are making the process easier for that to happen. So, buying something that includes a legal lower level doesn't, it'll remove the fear of getting shut down.
Right.
And, if you have a business plan that's going to count on income from a lower level that you're going to lose because the city shuts you down, you are going to be in a bit of a financial pinch where you're going to have to then figure out what to do to offset that. Legalize the unit.
But I remember my dad was alive years and years before I was a realtor, and I was coaching the women's hockey team in Brampton.
Okay.
And my dad had 2 units. He had basement apartments. And then I had to call the mayor of Brampton. I was friends with her, Susan Fennell. And I'm like, hey, is there any way to legalize basement apartments? My dad just got a notice. He's got to kick the tenants out. She's like, absolutely not. This was 15 years ago. They're like, no, as long as it was 20 years ago, maybe. And back then, Brampton was not allowing basement apartments. Obviously, tides have changed. Now it's much different. So it'd be interesting to see, because he had to sell the properties. You also have to be aware of the legalities of the area as well. That's why I'm bringing up that point, because not everybody allows basement apartments.
Correct.
But now in Toronto, we're also seeing a push, not just for basement apartments, but for, with garden suites or laneway homes. I've seen laneway homes. Actually, my wife has staged some of them for the laneway homes for sale.
Right.
Their own parcel of land.
Yes.
Do you see that? There's an uptick in that?
Listen, there's a real push. We have limited land available to us for development. So the reality is we're going to go vertical when we start, redeveloping certain areas. But there will also be segments where it's just not going to be practical to, build vertically in a condo type living that we're talking about here. So the city, I think, is going to become increasingly open for how do we increase the density, make some affordable housing, and laneway and garden is going to be one of those options that I think, again, could be, a great investment opportunity. It provides the need for those who are looking for, rental accommodation in that particular area. So I think it's going to be, increasingly considered as a potential source of income. I don't know exactly how much a laneway, of course, quality is going to, determine all of that, but it's not an outrageous number if you have a great location to put in a laneway home, make that investment, and ultimately is going to generate income for you that I might be, tempted to believe that it's going to actually pay for itself. So, something that a viewer might consider as well.
Yeah, there's a couple of ways we make money on. One of the things that Michael was alluding to is cash flow is one thing.
We like cash flow.
We always like cash flow. But the second was equity play.
Yep.
So equity play is you're assuming that even if you lose money, the property will gain in value because the prices increase, and you can use that equity and you pull a home line of credit, purchase something else, or sell it. And that's how you get your money. So cash flow. But we're always looking for properties in which we can at least be Neutral
would be great.
Yeah. And this is one of the issues I found with pre-con. We have Urbanation comes in. One of the great things about Boiler Page Signature, which I know I love, because I love the fact that we have our own special report from Urbanation. Mm-hmm. But the one thing so Urbanation's a company that does an economic analysis for us, and they do on real estate. And I think we're the only brokerage that does this. Okay. So we have really, really good information. But what Sean Hillebrand was saying last time, which kind of opened my eye, was the amount of new pre-construction condos that the guys got their keys and they're in negative position.
Yes.
Was what, 88%?
80, yeah.
82 or 88%, yep. Whereas 2 years ago it was only about 44%.
Yeah.
So my point to this is, guys, just because you buy real estate, and I think people have a misconception, it'll always go up. They don't run their numbers. And my friend, Jason Pereira is here as my financial planner. He's had to steer away people because they don't pull out a phone and actually calculate. Before you get into any investment, you have to run your numbers.
Yeah. If you're using HGTV as a basis for your real estate decisions, I think you're going to get yourself in trouble. They only show the positive sides of ultimately what you and I do on a daily basis, right? So as you
what do
say,
you mean? Why should only
it's not as glamorous and real as what the TV portrays it to be. So you would know that firsthand as well. But again, run your numbers. I think actually, David, just even to roll it back a little bit, you really have to be honest with yourself. Are you landlord material? And if the answer is no, probably look at another investment vehicle, because it's not for everybody. But if the answer is yes, I think, getting a financial plan in place, understanding that cash flow is important, because cash flow will take you through, periods of time where the market, doesn't behave in a way that we typically see it behave, and allow you to sustain yourself during those downturns, which we've quite frankly been going through for the last couple of years now. Having the cash flow to support the expense of the increased cost because of interest rate is going to be critical. I think there was a period of time where investors, I've learned this lesson, quite frankly, the hard way as well, is, we anticipated or we counted on interest rates being where they were for as long as they were to continue on indefinitely, which didn't happen. Right. So I was caught. Chris Slightum is always having a little bit of fun with me over this one, but I was one of those individuals who carried I carry a fair bit of variable rate product. And as interest rates went up, I just rode that wonderful ride.
I'm right there with you.
All the way up. And I kind of got to the point where it's like, well, you've gone this deep. Chris has reminded you about the benefits of the 5-year fixed, which you didn't jump on. And now you're just sort of riding it out the other end here. So, recognizing that, interest rates, do change and markets do change, and having a financial plan to get you through those times, I think is critical.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's a good way to end this conversation too. Like, and believe it or not, our time is up.
30 minutes.
It's been 30 minutes. Yeah.
Wow.
I told you it would fly by.
I lost a night of sleep.
No, you didn't.
I lost a night of sleep. Yes. What questions are you going to ask me?
Well, I told you beforehand. Yeah, I think we kept it pretty light. I didn't talk to you about any conspiracy theories and stuff. So, all right. But again, so Michael's a manager. I guess if somebody wants to know a little bit more about, get in touch with you or go to.
Just connect with me through the brokerage would be probably the easiest. I could give the Instagram, but we haven't really done real estate related content recently.
Right.
I am actually dabbling a little bit again in that field, but the Instagram is not reflective of the real estate business at this point. Yes. So we may need to get a second page. Or
if you ever see Michael's personal stuff, he do a lot of woodworking stuff.
I did the woodworking. That was mostly
the golfing
COVID.
Stuff.
Yes.
That was awesome. That was really great. But yeah, if you want to know more about Royal LePage Signature, we do have an Instagram, Royal LePage Signature. Obviously, if you want and you would like to reach out to me, if you want me to reach out to Michael, you can do that as well. Find the steps how I chose Royal LePage Signature. I'd love to help you with that. But as always, we always love the fact that you like, comment, and share. Wherever you're watching this podcast, please share with your friends. We like to hear comments, especially. Is there topics you want us to talk about? Is there somebody you want me to interview? We also take that into consideration. So please do your thing and like and subscribe and share. And we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you.